Welcome to the latest episode of our series Recognizing Outstanding Female Leaders in Manufacturing. I'm Susmita Singh, Senior Client Partner at Cognizant, and I'm joined today by Diane Schwarz, Group CIO at Smurfit Westrock, a global leader in sustainable packaging. Diane has led digital and cultural transformations across leading industrial manufacturing and critical infrastructure organizations. She's advised numerous corporate boards, serves as a board member herself, and is a founding member of T200, a nonprofit advancing women in technology. On top of all this, she loves to chase adventure, taking helicopter rides with her family, getting lost in remote destinations and national parks, and showing up for concerts of different kinds. So thank you so much for joining us today, Diane.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So with that, let's start from the beginning, Diane. What initially drew you to manufacturing, and how did that evolve into a role that you have today?
I grew up in the Midwest, and I think you go with what's in your backyard. And we have the good old Rust Bowl in the middle of the U.S., where I grew up and went to college. My first internship was in a manufacturing environment, so that really just defined the path. My first job out of college, though, was not in manufacturing. It was an entrepreneur opportunity. But I learned fairly early on that being a CEO or running your own company is not nearly as much fun as I thought it was. And I didn't really enjoy the amount of risks that I had to take with that. I moved on to other roles. I took other positions that were more in large corporate environments that you had a bit of a backstop and a broader team that you could tap into. As I progressed in my career, because we haven't talked about tech yet, I had supervisors that really noticed that I gravitated towards tech when I was fixing problems or just doing my own job. So I didn't actually move into tech until about 10 years into my career. So it was really others observing me and coaching me that helped guide me along the way into the technology aspect in manufacturing companies. But another significant influence factor in my career path was the choices that you make for family. At one point, when the economy took a tank and the only position that I had available to me required full-time travel, and I had two young kids. Thankfully, I have a really supportive spouse and great neighbors and a good support system. But to keep the continuity of my career, I had to travel full time. I made another inflection point later on when my family actually needed me home, and it was not working out well for the family for me to be gone 4 days a week. And I took a scaled down role intentionally because I needed to be home. And we need to not be afraid to let personal choices influence our career. I still ended up in a great spot. So I am not sad of any of the trade-offs that I made along the way, but it is not a straight ladder on the way up.
Yeah, definitely. It's not a linear process. Diane, as we were preparing for this discussion, I know you mentioned there were two powerful examples of different type of environments that you experienced. One that did not support your growth and one that did. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Absolutely. So in one of them, I was working as a program manager, really leading a transformation program is what we would call it today. It was in the Midwest, but even though this was in the early 90s, it felt like it was more in maybe the 1950s, a very traditional environment and very, very few women, especially in leadership roles. And my husband, who I must admit is a great coach and mentor to me, he's observed me and supported me throughout my career. His observation of that environment was that company doesn't have a glass ceiling. That company has a concrete ceiling. So while I was able to learn great skills and lead a great program, he and I both recognized it was not going to be a place where I could grow my career. So when he had a career opportunity that took him to a different state, I moved along and found a different environment. Then when we look at another environment that was supportive, that I was working in consulting at the time, I had two phenomenal role models that happened to both be women. So one of them, she was a relatively young partner. I say young, I don't know if she was 40, but she had young children, and she had an infant while I was working for her. And I remember she went to a partnership meeting and she brought her child with her so that she could breastfeed the child on break. This was okay, call it the late 80s. I was floored by that. I'd never been exposed to a woman leader that could integrate aspects of their family into the professional environment and be completely unapologetic about it. So I took a page out of that book, and I went on a job interview at some point later on in my life when I too had an infant and had to travel for that job interview. And I told them they needed to provide a babysitter um, in the hotel while I was interviewing, and they needed to bring me back to the hotel so that I could breastfeed or pump in between the interviews. I look back on it now and go, man, I had some gravitas. But I mentioned two role models at the same company in consulting. One of my other managers, she was great at what she did, technology, management, consulting, strategy. But what she loved to do was to sing jazz. And on the weekends, she was a jazz singer. So I just really loved that these two role models brought such enormous authenticity to how they showed up. And I think that gave me the empowerment that I too could be authentic in the work environment.
So, Diane, good to know that you had great role models and you learned from them how to be authentic. Can you share one example where you truly experienced that and you were able to showcase it?
You mentioned a couple of it in the intro for me, and that I have a zest for life. You will find me on mountains or at concerts, or you never know where I'm going to show up. But some of it is in how I show up, where I show up. One of the roles that I had was in oil and gas, and you need PPE when you're out on the oil field, and I needed steel-toed boots. There are fashion steel-toed boots. I got myself some pink stitched cowboy boots that I could wear out there on the oil field to still show I'm a girl.
That's awesome. Great to hear that story. Small little things, but it does make a difference on how you feel about being, one of the ones who's different in that environment. So switching gears to the bigger picture, Diane, what is your unique mission or passion as a leader in manufacturing?
When I really did soul searching on what is my purpose in life, it's to help others realize their potential. And there's two interpretations of that intentionally. One is to realize to help them see their potential, and then the other is to help them achieve their potential. So one that comes to mind was having a career conversation with a woman who was on my extended team at the time. And I asked her where she saw herself in 5 years. She wanted her boss's job. And I asked her, why are you shooting so low? Why do you not want my job? And she didn't realize what potential she had and didn't know that she should be aspirational to have my job. Now, that was a number of years ago. We both went different places in our career, but I have to say, I am so excited that she now is the CIO of a publicly held company at a place where I was 20 years ago in my career. So for me, it's so cool to think here I was a program director in this massive company, thought I could navigate my career, and now somebody who I led and managed has the top role, the company that I used to work at. I just think it's a really small world and a cool example.
And what a satisfying thing to do.
But not all coaching is about helping somebody grow to the top job. Sometimes it's helping them with the alignment on where they might have a better fit. Um, I I've had a number of folks that actually were aspirational about, say, a CIO role, and I didn't see that they were going to be successful in that path, either at the company they were working at or at other companies. So it's also my role to help them understand what their strengths are, what they're going to do really well, and what kind of path they can be really successful at, but one that is different than the path they thought they were on. And, ultimately, those folks are also happier with the outcomes and where they are. They just needed to understand that um, their expectations and their realizations were misaligned. And once you get them on a more aligned path, everything works out in the end.
That's awesome. And that's why we appreciate mentors like you. And that's the reason why we started this podcast for women leaders in manufacturing. So truly appreciate, Diane, what you're doing. And with that, I would like to encourage all of our listeners, if you know of a young mind, a friend, or a colleague who would find this podcast useful, please share it. You never know who will get positively impacted by this. And if you know another business leader that you would like to nominate for our future podcast, then please get in touch with us at the contact information shared below. Thank you so much, Diane.
Thank you for having me.